we go. Hello, it's Anna Pacheco, SantaFe101.com. Today, my guest is Brian Locke, and he is with Santa Fe Brewing Company. Brian, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, so I understand that the Santa Fe Brewing Company is the oldest brewing company in New Mexico. Is that correct?
Yep. Santa Fe Brewing Company originally started in 1988.
And can you speak up a little? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes, it's much better. If you can be closer to your computer, the audio is much better. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, yeah, Santa Fe Brewing Company started in 1988. It was founded by Mike Levis out in Galisteo, New Mexico. And I got involved in 1995 with three partners and ended up buying the brewery from Mike, the founder. One of the partners was Ty Levis, Mike's son, who was a brewer for many years for Santa Fe Brewing.
Okay, and I'm still having problem with the audio. Can you speak up a little here?
Sure.
See, like right now, it's perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah, so if you stay closer, yeah, close to me here, that'll be perfect. So you were saying your son was one of the partners as well?
Well, Mike Levis, the founder, his son Ty, which was one of the partners that bought it from Mike, along with myself and two others back in 1995, 96 actually. So in 2003, the three partners I had decided they would like to move on to another career. So I was fortunate enough to get an SBA loan and buy out my three partners in 2003.
So you've been doing this now on your own for about 18 years, right?
18 years, yep, that's right.
So tell me, I mean, I know a lot has changed. Santa Fe happens to be my hometown, but I had moved away for a long time and I came back in the early 90s. So from the early 90s to now, things are totally different. So tell me what it was like, you know, back in 1995, then 2003, and what the business environment is right now for a brewing company. Because I know a bunch of them have sprouted up around Santa Fe. So tell me a little bit about that. If people are watching this, they might want some background on maybe perhaps thinking about starting a business either in Santa Fe or somewhere here in New Mexico.
Sure. So to answer the first part of the question, you know, things in the 90s, the middle 90s here in Santa Fe, in terms of building a production facility and brewing beer, was a little more challenging just because they didn't have some of the big box stores where you could find all the hardware and equipment really to brew beer. So definitely more challenging back then from a startup perspective. Now that Santa Fe's grown and we have quite a few bigger box stores and convenience when it comes to parts and equipment, you know, it's much, I think, easier to enter the market. Certainly the craft beer landscape has changed dramatically in New Mexico over the past 25 years. When I first was in New Mexico in the middle 90s, I came from Portland, Oregon, and it was you know, there was quite a few craft breweries already on almost every corner up there. So it wasn't as prevalent as it is, or it wasn't as prevalent here as it was up there. You know, you fast forward to 2020 where we are now, and we're pretty much similar to where Portland was. I mean, we have a lot of breweries now that are popping up. We have little neighborhood pubs. So I think it's the evolution of the craft beer scene in New Mexico has evolved quite a bit over that 20 years. When I first came here, a lot of people didn't even know what a craft beer was. And so,
that's what I was going to say, that back in the day, back in the mid 90s, people weren't drinking craft beer. It was just still basically, you know, you were buying beer in a store and taking it home, that type of thing. So that wasn't a big deal. But do you know right now, like how many other brewing companies are in the Santa Fe area?
In Santa Fe, if I had to guess, I think there are 7.
Okay.
It depends on if you count additional locations under one entity. You know,
that's probably the one entity, but then, and I know that there's things, there are companies that have started up now. They're doing like just cider and different things. They're not beer, and so there's different types of things like that. One of the things I've noticed about you folks, because you've been around a long time, is that you actually sell your products in cans in stores. I've seen you. So has that been part of your success, that you're not just dependent on, traffic coming into your facilities and having a beer there, but you actually have this whole other wholesale market where your product is being moved through different avenues, liquor stores, grocery stores. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the only reason we were able to stay above water during the whole pandemic was because we had so many points of distribution, what we call the off-premise, which is, to your point, the chain world, the grocery stores, the clubs, all of those outlets that people were really kind of forced to go to for any commodities. Fortunately, we had really good representation in those outlets, so we actually performed very well during the pandemic. The wholesale part of the business for us is definitely the strongest part of the business. So we
Kind of
really
like your foundation, right?
yeah, I mean, we focus a lot of our efforts on building those relationships with the chain buyers and building those relationships with the independent owners in town and really fostering those so that we can, negotiate floor stacks and pricing. So that really paid off for us during the pandemic because we weren't solely relying on our tap room traffic, which obviously now that, we're coming out of this thing and things are improving, we're seeing all of our tap rooms, being, frequented quite a bit. So it's coming back and it's exciting.
Well, a few months ago, I interviewed a gentleman in Deming, New Mexico, and he's got a brewery out there. And he told me that he actually buys beer from you. So do you actually sell your product to other brewing companies?
Yeah, we actually we have reciprocity in New Mexico, not only with other breweries but with wineries, and now as of July 1st, distilleries. So we have reciprocity. We can serve each other's product at our locations, and so we do 2 kombuchas that we have on tap here at our headquarters, for example, that are made from the kombucheria, I think on Alameda Street here in Santa Fe. And I know there's many breweries and wineries and kombucheries and all of that serve our product at their places. So, we like to complement and fill in the gaps where we might have some, and I think other people do the same.
And do you think the market has become oversaturated? Are there too many breweries right now?
I don't think so. I think there's still room for the neighborhood pub. It's a lot more challenging these days, especially now because it's such a competitive landscape in the grocery store world that, starting a brewery that's a production brewery like we are, where your focus is wholesale and getting shelf space, that's very challenging just because it's such a competitive market. But I think there is some room for the neighborhood pub that's, in the right location and caters to the right neighborhood. I think they can be successful.
And does food play a part in that neighborhood pub? Do you have to have really good food to go along with that for the different beers? I mean, does that really help, do you think, or are people just going there to drink beer?
No, I think the food is a pretty big component of it. I mean, it certainly helps. We just struck a deal here at headquarters. We built out our own kitchen container and converted it into a full kitchen. And we ran it on our own for several months just before the pandemic hit, and then kind of went through this whole phase of whether or not we should do our own food or not, and came to the conclusion it was better to stick with what we knew, which was beer, and give somebody that knew food the opportunity to do food. So we did pop-ups over the past 3 months in our kitchen here, and it was very successful. All of our customer base really liked the ever-changing food and the diversity, and that it was always different out here. And then during that time, we kind of vetted out who would be the best partner for a longer-term lease, and we just inked a deal with Fusion Tacos LLC, which is a local food truck here in Santa Fe. They have 4 locations already, so they're very proven, extremely good food and really, really solid operators. We felt like they would be the best partner, so they signed a 6-month lease, and they're going to do all the food for us here at headquarters. So, I mean, I think the food piece, you got to have it, just because I think people want to be able to enjoy a beer and then have something to eat, because they can stay longer and maybe have another beer. And I think it complements craft beer. Food and craft beer go really well together. There's lots of great pairings. So I think that's really important, and that's part of the reason that I wanted really to figure out a food solution for the headquarters here.
And you keep saying the headquarters, that's your first location, if I'm not mistaken, out there on Highway 14. Is that correct?
Yeah, Highway 14.
Or off of Highway 14, right there.
Right,
you can actually see it on the Interstate 25 when you're coming into Santa Fe. You can see it to the right-hand side.
Exactly. That's the headquarters. Yep, right next to P&M. It's on Fireplace, 35 Fireplace.
And then I knew before the pandemic, you used to always bring in a lot of really good entertainment. And so I knew people that came in specifically just to go to your headquarters, as you call it, just to hear these different people perform. Tell me a little bit about that whole part of your business model in terms of entertainment and what it's looking like now. I mean, everything's so different now after the pandemic. Tell me how it's evolving right now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we hosted, probably 15 to 20 fairly large shows at the Bridge in 2019 during the summer. Anywhere ranging from 400 people to 1,500 people. So we had, a great lineup of music, and we have that for several years. Of course, last year we didn't have anything. We're just now starting to see a lot of music producers come to us with acts that are now scheduling tours, and so we're starting to see some bookings. We've got a show at the end of this month with Yonder Mountain String Band. That'll be I expect to be a pretty big show. And then as we get into August and September, things really start picking up. And we're a part of Santa Fe Music Week, which is put on by AMP Concerts, and of course, he's doing 3 or 4 shows over at the Hippico, and so we're going to be over there serving beer, and there's great bands there. So I see this fall being pretty well set up with September, October, probably 4 to 5 shows each month. That'll be big draws.
And how do you market these shows? Is it all done through social media, or how are people? I was amazed that, people would come to town and they were all going there and they knew about all these different bands. They had followings, a lot of these different groups. How do you market the entertainment?
We typically rely on the production manager who's producing the show, like an AMP Concerts. They're the ones that really come to us and say, I've got this act on this date, and they rent the facility from us, and then they do most of the promotional stuff. Of course, we support it through our efforts and our social media, and we support their efforts to market it. But a lot of times it comes from who's ever producing the show.
And you were saying up to like 1,500 people. So your establishment is large enough to have 1,500 people for a concert, or is it part of it outdoors?
Yeah, no, it's an outdoor venue. I mean, a majority of those people would be outside. I think we have a capacity occupant load of 1,200 on our outdoor stage, and the inside is 400. So it's 1,600 technically is our occupant capacity load. Rarely do we get to that level. I mean, most of our bigger shows, we keep it right at that 1,500 level. But then, many shows come in and there's 800 or 1,000. So it's definitely large enough to hold that many.
Okay, good. And you have how many locations now?
We've got 5 locations, 2 in Albuquerque, one at Tin Can Alley off of Alameda and I-25. We've got one at I-40 in Carlisle called Green Jeans Farmery. Those are both kind of, they're almost like a food hall. So we're a part of multiple tenants, and all of the tenants serve different types of food. And then we're the anchor tenant that's kind of the brewery anchor tenant in both of those scenarios. So those are really great places to visit because there's a lot of food options. And then I've got a place in El Dorado at the Tap House in El Dorado. And then downtown, right near the Capitol on Galisteo Street, called the Break Room. And then, of course, the headquarters that we talked about earlier is here. So those are the 5 spots.
And so you sound like you're really busy. Are you the biggest brewery in New Mexico, or are there other ones around? You don't have to name names, but you
Yeah, we're
sound
the
like you're the
largest.
biggest, you're the largest?
Yeah, we are the largest. We did about 40,000 barrels last year. That was our production. The way the Brewers Association tracks that is most brewers typically speak about barrels. A barrel of beer is 31 gallons. And so we did 40,000 barrels last year. I think the closest competitor of ours in this state did 25,000 barrels. So we're about 40% larger than the closest competitor.
During the pandemic, I saw this thing on the news. It was someplace, maybe it was in the Midwest or something, but because you're making craft beers, it doesn't have the longer shelf life or something. And so I saw this one thing where they were going to have to throw out a lot, like gallons and gallons of beer, because they couldn't sell it, like can it or bottle it and get it into stores. Is that true? Does craft beer have like a shelf life that if it's not sold in a month or 6 weeks, it's basically you have to throw it out?
No, it depends on the craft brewer. Certainly there's craft brewers out there that pasteurize their beer, and so they're comfortable on the shelf for probably 4 or 5 months. We don't pasteurize our beer because we like to keep the flavor profile, and we have usually about a 3-month window on our cans. So it really depends on people's processes and whether you pasteurize and how clean your process is. But yeah, for us, we did fairly well during the pandemic, even though we did have to eat quite a few kegs because the keg business was non-existent. And so our distributor had quite a few kegs and inventory that we kind of shared in some of that loss together. But there was some loss there, but compared to some of the others, the larger ones in some of the surrounding states, I feel like we fared pretty well. Could have been worse.
So even again, let's not talk about the pandemic. What are some of the major hurdles, or what have been, you've been at this now 18 years, on your own, not to mention the years you had before when you had partners. What are some of the major hurdles? If somebody's watching this interview, what should people kind of beware of if they're thinking of opening this type of a business, not necessarily beer, but something similar? What are some of the things that people should pay attention to before they decide to take the plunge?
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of things you have to look at. I mean, certainly what your business model is, the location is extremely important. You want to be in a place that, has the right demographic of people around you that's going to patronize your place. So location, I think, feeds is into a big portion of that. And I think there's always some apprehension for people to maybe make the step and try to open something on their own. But I think right now, in terms of getting money in a loan from a bank and the interest rates, there's probably not a better time ever to take that leap. And I say that because I know, for instance, I'm refinancing my big loans here, and the rates they're talking about are unheard of. I mean, they'll probably never be this low again. So, if you have those banking relationships and you can tap into them, I think this is the time to do it.
Okay, and then in terms of in terms of location, you're way the heck out there, out on I-25 practically. And you've been there for so long. That has never been a hurdle to go all the way out there to go to have a couple of beers.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's been a hurdle. When we first opened out here, we didn't get near the crowds that we.
Because the town has moved that way, but in the 1990s, there weren't Rancho Viejo, that big housing development. None of that existed yet.
Right. Yeah. No, we were off the radar, so to speak. I mean, we were out in the boonies. And now, like you said, everything's moving this way. So I find that we're actually getting busier every month from the previous month, either because more people discover that we're here or more people are moving into this part of town and exploring their neighborhood.
Okay. And then in terms of do you have is there a term for them? Is it like craftsmen, or do you employ the people that actually know how to brew the beers? What is the term? What do you call those types of people that actually make the brew for you?
Well, brewmaster.
A brewmaster.
Brewmaster. Yep. And the brewmaster I have, Bert Boyce, has been incredible over the past 4 or 5 years here. I mean, he's developed systems and put things into place for consistency and quality that, you know, I probably never would have thought of. So I feel really lucky that I have him as a brewmaster.
So there's a whole science to that. So if people are looking at this, they would need to hire people that have the know-how, know what they're doing, they have the experience.
I mean, I think that's the number one thing you have to do is if you build a strong team around you, you will be successful. As long as you let them do their job and don't try to micromanage them and give them the opportunity to shine, you know, and prove to you why you brought them here, because I think there's a lot of value in that. I had some trouble early on in giving up some of those responsibilities, thinking that I could do it. I should try to take it all on. But in reality, when I started to let go of those things and let people do their jobs that are really experienced and qualified, it went a long ways. And I've got great leadership management team here. And
Oh, good.
I let
So
them do their jobs.
So we're at the end of the interview. So I just want to ask you this one last question. This may be kind of a dumb question, but for me, it makes sense. So we're at Santa Fe, we're at 7,200 feet. We're the oldest capital city in the country, and we also have the highest elevation. Does elevation have anything to do with making beer? I mean, do you have to take into account being, I know like when you bake a cake or something, you have to take that into account. What about when you're making beer?
Sure. Yeah, the boiling temperature is different, right, in elevation. So of course we have to manipulate the recipes a little bit because you boil at a different temperature.
So you have to take altitude into account. Well, good. Well, like I said, we're at the end of the interview. Is there anything you want to end with, or you know, because again, is there anything after having been the largest and the oldest brewer in New Mexico, are there any sage words of advice you'd like to share with us?
Well, thank you, you know, to New Mexico and all of our fan base for supporting us over the past, you know, 25 years. And I just am very appreciative of New Mexico, its people, and this culture. It's just, it's a great place to live. I enjoy it. I love coming to work every day. And I feel blessed that, you know, we've made it to this point. And again, thanks to all of our fan base.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And I'll be sure to put your website and everything to accompany this interview so people can see like what different types of entertainment will be coming in the fall and that type of thing. So again, I want to thank you, Brian, and we'll stay in touch.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Take care.